We are proudly supported by Yonder Coffee. You can't have a podcast that involves pastries without a coffee and pastry shop, and Yonder Coffee is that for us. Yonder is a local SoCal coffee shop in Northridge, and they have the best coffee. And I am normally a cream and sugar kind of guy, but I have been digging their just black Americanos lately, and it's been amazing. It is really, really good. And they don't just have coffee, they have other drinks as well. My wife is really enjoying their lavender latte and lavender tea. It is amazing. And they make in-house pastries that are just out of this world as well. We eat them on our show. We send them to our guests. It is fantastic. You have to try Yonder Coffee. And now they have a cafe cart that will come to your events as well. Community is very important to Yonder, so invite them in and see how they can enhance your next event, wedding, ceremony, reunion, or Super Bowl party. Who knows? Anything can happen at Yonder Coffee. Visit Yonder Coffee at yondercoffee.com or Instagram at Yonder Coffee. My name is Adam, and welcome to Pastors and Pastries. I am a pastor, and I love pastries, and I'm super excited for our guest today. It is Michael Davis. He is the head pastor of Anchored Hope Church in Troy, Missouri, and Wright City, Missouri, and he is just a great guy. I've known him since high school. We were in the same theater class together, went to the same church, same youth group. We went on mission trips together. I have a picture somewhere of him giving me a piggyback ride while I was wearing a dress. Don't ask questions. We were in high school. And we had a really good conversation, so I hope you guys enjoy it. We do talk about mental health things, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and we just want to make it clear that if you are dealing with any of those three things, that there is help available. And we encourage you to go check out BetterHelp or Faithful Counseling, or log on to Psychology Today to look up therapists in your area or contact your healthcare provider. And we're not sponsored by any of those people, but especially as people in ministry, those things are hot topics that we don't get to talk about a whole lot. So we want to encourage you to talk to somebody to help you get through those situations. So I hope you enjoy Michael Davis.
Hey, you guys, now this message is for anybody.
Okay, God, you got our attention. Now what?
I am that I am.
Hurry up, kid, I'm starving.
Donuts.
I discovered then that religion had to become real, and then I had to know God for myself.
For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
All right, Michael Davis, welcome to Pastors and Pastries. Welcome. I'm excited you're on. You are the person I've known the longest that's been on this podcast, I think, so far. So I'm excited about that. First of all, tell us who you are. What's your name? Where are you from? And what church are you at?
Yeah, I am Michael Davis, and I'm in the St. Louis area. I've kind of grown up around here in different spots here and there, but I planted a church 11 years ago in Troy, Missouri. It's outside of St. Louis, and then out of that church, we planted another one just a year ago in Wright City, Missouri. It's kind of down the highway from St. Louis, and so we've been out here for 11 years, and then before that, my dad planted a church in O'Fallon that's around St. Louis, and so just always kind of been a Midwestern boy, but here we are.
Yeah. So the second church you've planted, is that just like a sister church, or is it a completely different church? Or
Yeah, so when my dad planted, his kind of model that he always kind of shot for was, let's not ever grow like a really, really huge church. Let's try to keep it small enough to where, if you were gone, people would miss you, and it was kind of connected in relationships and stuff. And so it was actually his church that called me out to even plant the Troy church 11 years ago. They had people that were driving, 25 minutes, and they loved it. And they said, man, we love this church, but we'd really like a church in our town that, we could invite our neighbors to, that, did stuff in our community and everything. And I was in Nebraska at the time, and they called me and said, would you be interested? Because you know our DNA, the culture already. We wouldn't have to teach it to you or anything. And I actually told them no 3 times. I was like, no.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I was looking to plant. I was a youth pastor in Nebraska, and I had actually kind of, been told, we're going to kind of groom you to take over when this pastor retires and everything. So I had it all set up. But,
nice.
But Kate and I talked about it, and I just had a heart for planting a church. And so I was actually interviewing at churches trying to find the right fit, and nothing was fitting. And so home called, and I told them no, just because a lot of church plants fail. And it would be, there's something about having a home to come home to, like at Christmas and holidays. It's like, hey, I get to go home for the holidays. And I'm like, okay, so if I go home and it's my job and I'm no longer Michael, I'm Pastor Mike. And then what if I fail? I mean, I'm failing. I mean, the people that were in our core were my college roommate, my best man in my wedding, his parents, people you and I went to youth group with. And I'm like, okay, so if I screw this up, that's one thing. But then if I screw it up with people that I love, and I can't ever show my face at home again.
You'd have to run away.
This could be the most devastating thing that ever happened to me. But we eventually, it was really the people that were part of the core of that thing that were asking me to come. And Kate and I came, and our hearts were just aligned. We all had the same kind of dream. And so I told him yes. And my dad's moved on. He's, in Oklahoma now and everything. But but we just kind of took the ball and ran with it. And our Troy campus has a building now that we've had for 5 to 6 years. It's an old building. It dates back to the Civil War. It's the oldest church in town, but we've completely rehabbed it and gutted it and done as much as we could. And so from the outside, it looks like a haunted house. On the inside, it looks like a modern church. And so what you see online does not even represent what the parking lot looks like.
Wow.
But it's cool. And so same thing kind of happened in the middle of the pandemic. We had all these people driving from Wright City to Troy because their churches just shut down. They weren't doing anything.
Yeah.
And so here I had all these people from Wright City going, hey, we would like a church in our town.
Same situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, it's just a God thing. So I do Wednesday night in Wright City, and I do the same message.
Okay.
And then on Sunday, we just went to 2 services, and then I do that same message on Sunday twice. So everybody's getting the same content, and everybody's getting the same preacher. And then my staff, they rotate. So we do youth in Troy on Wednesday nights, and then youth on Sundays in Wright City. My children's pastor, Carrie Allred, which she goes back and forth between the campuses with me, and it just kind of works. People ask me how in the world we do it, and I'm like, I don't really know yet. It wasn't my plan; it was God's. I really thought I would hire somebody by now to be the campus pastor, but in the times that we're in, a lot of pastors, younger pastors especially, after the pandemic, they're established. They don't want to move. They're like in your and I situation. You just got married. You have a life where you are. If somebody called you and was like, do you want to move and cross many states and start over again? A lot of people our age would be like, nah, not really, because my spouse works and they have a life and I don't want to just uproot everybody. So it is what it is, but man, I really do enjoy it. I probably think this last year has been the best year of ministry I've had, and probably the most fun I've had. I'm having the most fun I've ever had doing it, which is probably something we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's definitely fun.
That's amazing, man. Well, that's awesome. Like, I just keep on blessing you. And coming home to plant a church, I would assume that some of that fear would be like, oh, I'm Brian's son. Like, I'm Pastor Brian's son, just coming home to do it, so there's a shadow almost did you feel that at all? Of like, there might be a shadow from your dad already and then going to go plant a church, under your dad?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that, because it was a whole life learning thing. Obviously I grew up, as a pastor's kid, but then too, the first context that I had in Nebraska, the pastor that I was under, he was very much about the position of being a pastor. A pastor, should be respected, should be seen. I even remember one time I was talking about the pastor, and I named him by his first name, and somebody corrected me and they said, no, it's Pastor this. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. And they were very much about that. And so, for me, me as Michael, right? When we were in youth group and we were kids, you knew me as Michael. And really, when I became a pastor, there was this idea I came out of with college that I am not now, I'm no longer Michael, I am Pastor Mike, right?
Yeah.
And it was almost like this identity that I adopted and I felt like I had to have in order to get respect, but also in order to earn the right to be heard, which, keep in mind, a lot of people in my context, they go to ministry, they go to school for 4 years, and then they go to seminary. So by the time they actually start ministry, they're probably 25, 26,
Right.
whatever. I was 22 when I was in Nebraska. So I look like a baby, I mean, I look like a kid. And so I was trying to get respect from people. And I thought I could wear the pastor hat in order to get that. And so I went by Pastor Mike. So when I came here, to your point, I was afraid of, here I am with my college roommate and people who have known me for 20 years.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? And I told my dad, we had a conversation. I said, here's my rule. In front of people, you can never refer to me as your son. You can never look at me and be like, now, son, you have to refer to me as Pastor Mike, and I was really strict about that. And I understand, looking back on it, why we did that. And it did help me in some ways. But what I've learned over time is there was a point in time in my life where I finally took that hat off and I was like, okay, I don't need to be Pastor Mike. And it was actually on a sabbatical that I took. I made this kind of decision. I spent a lot of time with God and everything. And I was like, you know what? I think one of the things that's holding me back is I'm trying so hard to be Pastor Mike that I'm losing sight of who Michael is. And so
That's good.
I just came back from that sabbatical and I was like, all right, here's the deal. I am no longer Pastor Mike. I'm going to be Michael, and I'm going to unapologetically be myself. And so, I mean, I'm covered in tattoos.
Yeah.
There was a point in time where I was told in college, don't show tattoos. If you're going to have your tattoos, don't show them. So I was always like, hiding them under my shirt and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many things I would do, how I would get my hair cut, how I would dress. I felt like I had to look
The part.
pastoral, to look the part. And then I came back from a sabbatical and I just kind of had a come to Jesus thing and, started being really aware of like mental health and stuff. And I was like, nah, man, if I'm going to do this and if I'm going to last in this game, I got to be unapologetically myself. And so I started changing everything, how I dressed, what I did. I started, unapologetically showing my tattoos and what they are.
Yeah.
And even how I introduce myself on Sunday mornings. If you watch online, I used to introduce myself as Pastor Mike to everybody. But now if you watch online, my go-to thing, it's funny, my people can recite it back to me because it's automatic.
Yeah.
I get up there and I say, hi, my name's Michael and I'm one of the pastors here. I don't use my authority to go, I'm Pastor Mike and I'm the senior pastor around here.
Yeah.
I simply say I'm Michael and I'm one of the pastors because I am.
You are.
I'm one of the pastors. You're going to learn pretty quick that I'm the lead dog, but I don't need to, tote that on stage.
Right. It's not the first thing you need to know.
Nah, man. And so that's my introduction to people all the time. And even when I go up to people, I introduce myself as Michael. I very rarely tell people that I'm Pastor Mike or I'm a pastor. And even when people are like, this is Pastor Mike, I always correct them and I say, you just call me Michael.
Yeah.
And so some people call me pastor, some people call me Michael. But at the same time, anytime I'm introducing my staff, I always refer to them as Pastor Ashley, Pastor Carrie, Pastor Mike, because that's my way of showing them respect, pastor to pastor. I don't expect it from anybody, but I always give that courtesy to other pastors as well. I don't know. It's just a weird thing that I've kind of developed, but it's really allowed me to be myself and to have fun. And, it helped. It helped during my working relationship with my dad. But I think when he left and I was free from that and I had to decide who I was going to be, like, okay, now your dad's gone. You got this church by yourself and it's up to you. What are you going to do? And I started to have some mental health crises and figure some things out for myself. And I just came back from that sabbatical and I was like, all right, man, this is who I'm going to be from now on. And I can't tell you how much it actually helped me as a pastor relate to people and seem like a normal person.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I totally get that. And it's I think it did serve a time for you too, because I mean, different. I have a different ministry situation than you. You went to school. So let's back up a little bit. You went to school, Mid-American Nazarene. You went to school knowing you're going to be a pastor, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I fought with it for a long time. You know, I tell this story all the time, but I didn't want to be a pastor. I was going to go to SEMO and be a physical therapist. That was my dream. And then God got a hold of my heart and called me into ministry. And that just was the best place to go for me to learn that. But, you know, even in,
Yeah.
I told this story a couple weeks ago. I remember my freshman orientation, very first class we took. The professor made everybody go around the room and say, you know, why do you want to be a pastor? And then everybody's going around the room and telling these great stories of, you know, they were lost and then they were found and God got a
Yeah.
hold of them and they just want to go out and change the world. And he came to me and they're like, why do you want to be a pastor? I was like, because I have to be. Because God hates me and
'Cause I have no choice.
chose me for some reason, you know. And even my dad, when I first told my dad, he was not supportive of it. He
Really?
pushed back hard, and
Oh wow. Well, he knows.
he
the
knows,
life. Yeah.
and he always told me too. He always said, "Man, you know, when we finally, you know, came to peace about it and everything." He told me, he's like, "Hey, I don't want you to think I was being a hard butt on you or anything, but you know, the thing is Michael, you're going to have days where like you're not going to want to get out of bed and do ministry.
Mm,
The only reason you're going to get up is because it's between you and God, and you know it's what God wants you to do. It's not because people or because everybody thinks you're great or clapping or anything. You're going to get out there and you're going to shovel the snow and you're going to shovel the sidewalk and you're going to be there before anybody else.
yeah.
And nobody's going to thank you, but you're going to do it because you know it's what God wants you to do." And so he was just really careful to not, you know, tell me, "Oh yeah, you can do this." You know, he wanted it to be a personal decision of mine between me and God. And
Yeah.
I rode that out. And I mean, I went to college and I was just trying to be obedient. I was fighting it still, but I was just trying to be obedient. And, you know, sure enough, I probably graduated with 20 to 30 ministry majors, and there's probably only a handful of us left that are still in ministry because a lot
Mm,
of them did burn out, especially
yeah.
during the pandemic and everything. And so I'm thankful for those lessons, and I'm thankful for my dad and how he helped me navigate through it and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was at MNU, and then I went straight from MNU to Nebraska.
And how
I
long were you there?
I was there for 2.5 years.
As a youth pastor, right?
As a youth pastor,
Yeah.
yep. And then to Troy, and I planted my first church by the age of 24,
Man,
and I turned
how
36
crazy.
next Monday.
Jeez. The G's. We'll go back to the being Pastor Michael thing. I think coming back to no matter what happened in Nebraska, but coming back to your home, like you said, where people saw you grow up, like they saw you as a little kid, and then now you're this man, and now they have to submit under your authority. Like that's hard for people. So being Pastor Michael and making sure that people are calling you that, I think that probably helped you in that aspect of being a pastor to the community of people that has saw you at your lowest, at the times where you were a goofy teenager, making weird jokes, you know, and now you're on the stage preaching and bringing people to salvation.
You
Go
want to
ahead.
know something really weird? All right,
What?
you'll relate to this because you know me. So I kid you not. So we plant this church, right? There's been like 3 occasions where I've had ex-girlfriends from high school show up at
No.
church. You know some of them. You know some of them. I'm not gonna
Well,
say
I'm glad,
but
I'm
you
glad
know
they're
some
at
of them.
church, though. I'm glad they're at church.
Some of them you dated. Some of them you dated. I dated. So I'll paint you a picture. This is everyone's worst nightmare. Okay. So I'm preaching. I see the person. I clearly recognize them. They're now married. I'm now married,
Yeah.
right? I'm at the back door shaking hands and saying bye to people. Girl walks directly up to my wife and was like, "Hi, I'm so and so. I used to date your husband."
No.
I'm like,
Oh my
well,
gosh.
these
Well,
are
there's that.
these are stories not everybody could tell.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's weird context like that. I mean, you got people who literally saw you when you were a teenager and when you were stupid. You got
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. I've had to DM apologies to people and be like, "Hey, I just hope you know I'm not the same person I was when I was 13. I know I did some ignorant stuff, but
Yeah.
you know, but it's cool too because it's helped me make some connections and stuff to people that I've had for a long time, and it's opened some doors for me. And I've seen people that were a part of my life and your life
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, or, even longer. And it's funny. My worship leader now was a guy you and I went to high school with that I took drama class with, and he's my worship leader,
That's
and
amazing.
I'm like, it's cool in the position that I'm in now. I'm so grateful because I look back, and if I could go grab my younger self when I was 15 and go, hey, that guy sitting in front of you, that's a couple years older than you,
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
going to be your worship pastor. And one day you two are going to be, crying on Sunday morning, praying over, his kid who's going to be at your
Yeah.
altar because they're dealing with something. And I'm like, man,
Man.
how cool is that to like God to connect those dots and intersect our lives? Like
Uh-huh.
it opens my eyes, because now all the time when I meet people and stuff, I'm like, I wonder where this is going to go. I
Yeah.
wonder in 20 years, what relationship am I going to be, have with this person, and what difference are maybe we going to be doing in the world? But also too, it makes me think, when I run into somebody now, I treat everybody like they're going to maybe be that person.
Mm.
Like, this person, need to treat them a certain way and love them a certain way, because
Mm-hmm.
man, what if they're the next person in my life who's going
Yeah.
to, down the road, God wants us to be on a team together, do something together. It's just,
Yeah.
it's cool, man.
That's awesome. My head pastor always says going to Ralph's, which is a grocery store in California. Going to Ralph's isn't always about just going to Ralph's. There's always a reason why you're somewhere. Pumping gas at the gas station isn't just about pumping gas, but it's about who you may come in contact with, and
Right.
their life journey, and God may have placed you there for a specific reason. So that's fantastic. So we obviously went to school with people that we needed to go to school with, so that way one day you guys can be working together. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and yeah, going back to what I was going to say about the pastor thing is I liked being called Pastor Adam, because I came back to the Lord in my adult years, in my mid 20s, and I started going to this church that I'm now a youth pastor at.
Mhm.
And so those people saw me come in as a newcomer. They've already been there for a while. They saw me go from, reconnecting with God to going through these struggles of like, okay, I have to admit my sins and I have to get back on the right track. And then they saw me pursuing God, but that was just to congregate with them. I was in the audience with them, and, submitting under the authority. And then I started doing this internship with the church to become the next youth pastor. And I had no real training. I didn't go to school for it. I went to school for theater. So, that doesn't really line up with being a pastor other than stage experience. But to be called, the first time I was called Pastor Adam, it was like, oh my gosh, God, look at where God's brought me to. Look
Yeah.
at all the things that I did and I had to get rid of to now be called a pastor. Like, man, that's amazing. That's only through God's grace. That's only through God's work in his hands. So that was really, I enjoyed that. And in our church, we call him pastor. We don't use his first name, but when he introduces himself, he says, hey, I'm Daryl. I'm the pastor here at the church. And yeah, so I totally get that. You don't need to be having that title to tell people that you're a pastor. Just by who you are and what you're doing, what you're saying, people should kind of see that, oh yeah, there's something different about him. He is leading something here. God's definitely working in his life. You mentioned it being a PK kid. Are the myths true? I mean, I knew you, but are like PK kids really the worst from from your own perspective?
They're either the worst or the best. There's no in between. No, it's dude, it's funny. I know so many PKs, and I, even when I was a teenager and I would meet people's parents or something, their eyes would kind of light up. Like, so what does your dad do? He's a pastor. Ah, shoot, you're a PK.
Yeah.
Missionary kids. Now those are the crazy ones. You got to watch out for missionary kids. No,
Yes.
but I do get there. I grew up in a unique situation, because my dad, he tells a great story of testimony where, he grew up in the church and then he walked away from the church and then he came back.
Mm.
And his whole mission was to reach people who were like him. He was
Mhm.
after the unchurched. That was what he was about. And so in a lot of ways, my dad was very genuine. He was not fake. I mean, he
yeah.
was himself in a lot of ways. And I never felt like my dad was pretending or anything like that. And so I always grew up around that. And I know a lot of pastors' kids and stuff who they don't attend church, and they walked away from their faith, not because of anything between them and Jesus, but because of their parents. because they saw their dad or their mom on stage one way, and then when they were at home, they were another. And I come into those situations a lot. I even come into that situation because we're a church for people who don't like church, and so I talk to people all the time who have walked away from their faith, and they're curious about walking back. And I ask them, and a lot of times it's hangups with their parents, because they'll say, "Man, my mom and dad, went to church and did the whole dance, and they were deacons and they were elders and they were this and they were that. But behind closed doors, they were not kind to one another. They were not nice to each other." When I know people of stories like, and then after I graduated high school, they got divorced. And now I was like, what? You guys can't reconcile? I thought you guys are followers of Jesus. I thought this is like a thing you guys are supposed to know how to do. And so, but I grew up in a unique context where I got to see a genuine relationship with God. And I grew up with a mother and a father who really loved God and really truly did love people, and who taught us that. I mean, it's why, when you and I were talking, my dad would always tell me, that he didn't plant a church, we planted a church. He always considered New Life, the church he planted, a church we all planted. And my kids even today, it was funny the other day, I was playing video games, and when I'm playing online, my name is Pastor Punk Gaming. And I was playing with somebody, and my son was playing with me, and somebody said, "Are you really a pastor?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And I was telling him, I said, I've planted two church. And my son goes, "We've planted two churches, Dad." We've. And I said, "That's right, son. We've planted two churches." Because it's a family affair. It's not a one-man job. It's a team effort. And so, God bless PKs, man. God bless anybody who grows up under this. And I'm definitely aware of it as a dad and a pastor. I got two kids. I got a 9-year-old little girl. I got a 7-year-old son. And my daughter will throw my messages up in my face. My daughter will be like, "No, you said on Sunday, you need to go deal with the plank in your eye and not worry about, she'll call it out. We'll be in the car, and me and Kate will be talking about the story. And Olivia will go, "Are you guys gossiping right now?" Like, no, we're not gossiping. I'm informing your mother of a situation. I'm not making any judgment, But yeah, I mean, I'm really thankful for my parents and the context that I grew up in, and my sister's in ministry now too. It's just stupid. I don't know
what God. Crazy.
I don't know why God hates our family so much.
But here's the thing: you guys are good at it, though. You know what I mean? Like, you guys, you were made to be pastors. Like Pastor Brian, like you said, genuine man, great sermons, really easy to connect to. From what I see online, I haven't been to your church as an adult, but from what I know from you as a teenager and what I see online now, like, it's great. You have great stage presence. You connect really well with your congregation, and I'm assuming Brianna's the same way. I mean, she's a kids pastor, right?
Yeah, she's a kids minister, and she just moved. She just actually moved to Kansas. So she was in Oklahoma, and she moved from Kansas. But yeah, I mean, we just grew up having a heart for people, and ministry is not something we wanted to step into. It's just God chose us for some reason. And I do, man. I look back. Sunday was one of those Sundays, man. I shared a story on Sunday. I put it on my socials today because it's just a great clip, a great story. And it's just one of those moments, man. Like I actually had leadership team last night. I got to share this story on Sunday, and I don't usually do altar calls. I'm not a big touchy-feely type guy, but every once in a while it calls for one of those moments. And so we had an altar call, and we had this kid come down, the 7-year-old kid come down to the altar and pray for the first time, and about something he was stressed out about, something he was anxious about. And within a couple hours, he got a message that kind of answered what he was anxious about. And that 7-year-old kid told his mom, "Oh, wow. So God really does hear my prayers." And at the same time, a friend of mine from CrossFit came to church and came down to the altar, and I had no clue why or anything. And second service, there's, a woman who identifies as LGBTQ walked into church for the first time in years because of an invitation we gave her. And I was just telling my leadership team, I'm like, look at this. I'm like, forget numbers, forget how many butts are in the seat for a minute. In just the last 24 hours, we got to share this story. A 7-year-old kid prayed for the first time and like
Yeah.
got to experience God's faithfulness on the other side of his decision to pray. Here's somebody who's LGBTQ who doesn't feel like there's a church for her or a place for her in a church. She walks in the doors and is like, I'll be back next week. All these stories.
Amazing.
And I literally, I had this moment. I've been in tears so much the last like 48 hours because of all of this cool stuff. And I do, Adam. I look back and I never once go, man, I'm really good at my job. You know, I go all the time. I just go, God, I don't know why you chose me. I have no clue. And I have no clue why you're doing this in my church right now. I don't feel like I deserve it. I don't feel like I've earned it. It's always just being obedient to the Spirit and feeling that nudge and saying yes to it. That's all I've ever wanted to do. And that's all I ever want to be known for, is, that Michael was obedient and he really did put people first. And what he always wanted to do is be the best communicator of the gospel that he could be so that people had a good experience. And I don't know, man. I mean, I appreciate you saying that and stuff. But God's using us and I don't know, I'll do it for as long as I can, but I'm also not going to beat a dead horse. I've always told Kate and my friends, like after Anchored Hope, I'm done. I'm not going anywhere else. I'm not going to any other churches. If I get a job offer to take a bigger church or something, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to ride this. And if it's 2 more years or if it's 20 more years, I'm in for it. And once I'm done, I look at this as like serving in the military. Once my time is up, I've done my service and I will gladly walk away and I've done my time and, thank you for your service. I'm not going to be that guy who stands up there and is squeezing the lemon till it's completely dry and needs to get off the pulpit. As long as I'm still connecting with it, with the culture and the world and I'm communicating the gospel clearly, I'm in for it.
Yeah.
But as soon as God tells me to step away, I will gladly go work at a gym or Walmart or Lowe's or whatever I'm supposed to do, man.
Yeah, that's true. You mentioned it. You're teaching CrossFit, right?
Yeah, man. It's so weird. It's one of those things. I'll tell you what. So in 2015, I found CrossFit, which I've always been into fitness and everything.
Yeah.
But I found CrossFit, and it was my escape, and it came at the perfect time because I was going through a lot of stuff, and it came at the perfect time, and it was my escape, and I was like, oh, good, I'm gonna use this as a place to, again, I hadn't made the decision yet to just fully be Michael. But that was my place to take off the hat because it was like far away from my church and everything. And I was like, okay, this is where I can be Michael and I don't have to be Pastor Mike and I can take the hat off for a minute and breathe. But then situations changed and it forced me to come to a gym closer to where I lived. So I did, and I started teaching CrossFit and everything. And so all of a sudden these people like would see me at the gym and like, hey, he's a nice guy. He's a good coach. He seems like a funny, he's funny. He's relatable and stuff. And this guy's a pastor. Like, I don't think pastors are even supposed to look like this guy or like act like this guy. I don't even think pastors are allowed to like, be in this place and listen to Metallica right now, but okay. But they started coming to my church. And so, fast forward to now, I kid you not, in my church, I have 30 CrossFitters. 30 CrossFitters. They're on my leadership team. They're serving. And then I've had people that have gone from my church to CrossFit to where at my gym, we literally have classes. We call them the Anchored Hope class. And it's all people from my church and my staff. And we've just in the last 4 weeks had people from our gym come. And I never expected this in my life. But yeah, we're seeing this like blending of the worlds all of a sudden. And it's so cool. So it's like when you walk in my church, you will see it's a whole gambit of ages and everything, but you will see a lot of tattooed buff men and women I've told them, I said, you know what, if one church wanted to fight us in an alley, we would win. we will be fine.
They're just doing easy ups or whatever. They're pull ups on
Yeah.
the rafters and
Yeah, if the
deadlifting
church
pews.
Yeah, I've had people say, you're the only pastor I've seen with his shirt off, sweaty, yelling, while loud music is blaring. Like the context of like, you're my pastor on Sunday up there in your polo talking and crying, crying like a baby about, some sappy story. And then 24 hours later, you're in the gym ripping your shirt off, going, let's go, chalking up and everything. It's a weird context, but it's so cool too for me because my context is literally with my church. I worship with my church. I pray with my church. I work out with my church. I serve with my church. My church, they're my friends. They're my family. They're my workout partners. It's such a unique, cool thing to experience. But it makes our faith community so, so cool. And it normalizes us in a lot of ways because we're not just worship church going people. We are mothers, we are fathers, we are children. We have jobs, we're entrepreneurs. We're all this thing. And so it just makes our church look like this community who's just, just like when we go to the gym to take care of our fitness, we go to the church to take care of our souls, This is spiritual. It's all of it all mixed together. And so it's created this really cool context for us. And I never in a million years thought that CrossFit would be my number one form of evangelism. But it is just working out and just being Michael, being myself. It has normalized me to, allow people to come up and approach me and want to come to my church and go, well, man, if that guy and all these people and his wife, they seem like normal people, I don't think they're going to bite me if I go.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go try it and I'm going to go to church with them.
You've mentioned a couple times here about normalizing yourself and taking off that pastor role. Has that really, I think in today's world, people put pastors on a pedestal, which is why we really want to do this podcast to show that all of us are the same, humans. We're all flawed in some way or another. You're eating a donut hole right now and you're a CrossFit manager. So
I appreciate the pastries, man. I literally came from the gym and there was a pastry waiting for me. I love this show. I want to be a guest. I want to return.
But do you think that, pastors put their mental health and their own health in general on the back burner for their ministry? And I feel like you've done a really good job of separating that and saying, no, I need to focus on myself too, so I can focus on my ministry. Is that kind of what led to your sabbatical and to you rethinking of taking that hat off?
So I think two things. I think we do it to ourselves as pastors, and then I think people have done it to us, right? It's part of the beast that we created. So like I said, I think a lot of pastors, they look the part, they put a hat on, they put a mask on. I know pastors who talk differently on stage than they would talk if you met them at Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
I know pastors who dress differently, all of this stuff. I know pastors who will talk one way on stage and then they're going home and they're watching House of Dragon, but they'll never tell you that, you know what I mean? But they are, And so we've done it to ourselves in a lot of ways. But and a lot of pastors get a hero complex is what happens, I think, because it's addictive to feel good, to help people, right?
Yeah.
But that's not sustainable. But then the other thing is people have put us up on pedestals, and so it's a thing that goes round and round, right? And I think that as a pastor, you have to do certain things to manage that. I always tell people, I'm not a counselor, I'm a pastor. So if people want to meet with me, I tell them, I'll meet with you one time, but if you want to meet on a regular basis, I am not a counselor. I was not trained for that. I had a semester in counseling, okay? And I think I got a C in that class, okay? It wasn't good. I didn't learn anything. So I'm not a counselor. Now, other pastors, they would love to do that. They get off on that,
Yeah.
I'm not that guy. But for me, what happened was, again, I was wearing the pastor hat. My dad left. I was on an island by myself. A lot of stuff happened that just was tricky situations. We broke away from, the church that my dad was pastoring. We broke away from them, which was a situation we didn't want to happen. It just happened. And, looking back on it, it's all good, but there was a lot of stuff that happened, and there was a lot of things that were in flux. Again, I was still very young.
Yeah.
And then there was one night where just a lot was happening, and I had my first panic attack. And it was like, I was talking to my wife in the kitchen, and I was like, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And my wife was anxious about something. And it was like there was a power cord in the back of my head, and somebody pulled it, just yanked the vac. It was like when a vacuum just dies when they yank. It was, and I mean, I just went back. Everything blacked out. I went backwards. My wife grabbed me, luckily, so I didn't like hit my head or anything.
Yeah. Wow.
And, again, we all have, I think now we're much more aware, but, I've always assumed that you go to a counselor because you had a real problem, and so, going to counseling was kind of like a dirty word.
Yeah.
But after that, my wife was like, you need to go see a counselor, and this was something I always knew was in me. I've always been an anxious person. I've dealt with depression. I've dealt with suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. And but I always just kind of kept it myself. And like a lot of Christians, I always tried to pray it away.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about it a whole lot. And, when I would mention it to like my parents or something, they said what any parent would say. My mom would tell me, you just need to have faith. You just need to have faith. And I'm like, I have faith. That's not helping. I'm praying. I felt like Paul with a thorn in his side. I'm praying for this to go away. And guess what? It's not. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I tried so many things, and then I had that panic attack. And then I started to really, I remember another thing that really happened was me and my wife were sitting down, and we love Netflix and stuff, and so we were sitting down watching a show, and that show 10 Reasons Why, was it 10 Reasons? 10 Reasons?
Yeah.
10 Reasons Why came out, and it's all about suicide. It's about a
Right.
girl who commits
Teenage.
suicide and the reason she does it. And my wife's watching the show, and she's like, this show's so stupid. I don't know why this girl would want to do this. Why would she feel this way? Why would she what? And I was sitting there, and I was relating to it. This is one of the best.
Wow.
This was one of the best shows that depicted how I felt a lot of times. And so my wife was like, kind of like, oh my gosh, like blowing it off, kind of like, bashing the character. And for the first time in my life, I turned to my wife and I was like, well, I feel that way. And she was like, what, you do? And I was like, how she feels is how I feel a lot of times. And it was the first time I ever said it out loud, and because it felt like admitting a weakness almost. But then after that, my wife started to really understand me in a different way and was like, you've got to go talk to somebody. This is not something you can pray away. You've tried that. This is not something I can do for you. And so for the first time, I went to counseling, and it was great. Counseling helped me so much. It helped me. I remember one of the things my counselor told me was, I want you to understand your anxiety is a superpower. He said, so what you do is you look at things that could happen. You look at stuff and you look at people, and you can see all the things that could potentially happen. You can see the good things that can happen, but you can also see the bad things that can happen, and you want to be prepared for those bad things. He said, that's a superpower. You can see into the future.
Yeah,
now here's
you're
the
Dr.
problem.
Strange.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem is that when you see into the future and you see the potential bad things that you want to try to control, but then you try to control what could possibly be bad. And that's what makes you spin. And that's what you need. So use your superpower, because man, when you're at your best, you throw great events. It's why you're a great pastor. It's why people love your community events and stuff. You're organized. You've thought through everything, it's a compliment I get all the time. Man, you have thought through everything. You've thought through people's experience. You've thought through what they're going to see, what they're going to feel, what they're going to smell, all of that stuff. because I'm meticulous about that. So he's
Yeah.
like, hey, she's like, I don't want to give you drugs and like numb this. I don't think you're at that point yet, but I want you to harness your superpower. And when you feel like it's starting to spiral down a bad place, here are some tools you can use to control it and pull yourself back. And so
Mhm.
when I started to learn that, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't need to pray this thing away, or I don't need to numb myself till I can't feel it. I need to use it. It's like anything. It's like I always tell people, you have passion and you have anger, right? Passion is a great thing to have. Passion can also turn into anger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like everything has its dark side and its light side,
Yeah.
and it's finding balance in the force, right?
Uh-huh.
to try to, because you could go either way with it is the problem. And so
Yeah.
for me, what I was dealing with in my mental health was learning to do that. And I've used counseling. I've been on testosterone for this last year. Using testosterone as a supplement
Mhm.
has changed my mood so much. So, I mean, I've looked into everything. I started looking at my sleep, what I eat, my fitness. I got my testosterone tested. I found out I was low in testosterone. I do testosterone treatment now. I feel fantastic. I am laser focused. That has helped quite a bit. And so now I'm in this great place. But like this year, I finally started to, we really try to focus on being a next gen church. And what we mean by that is we want to be a church that hands the church over to the next generation. So we started really doing a lot of research on Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and looking at like, what does Gen Z want to talk about? What are the big hot topic things that, they're looking for answers for that they're not getting from culture. And one of those was anxiety. And so I did a series on anxiety, and I was very honest with people. I want you to know, I am not preaching to you. I am preaching from myself, because
Experience.
I have thought about suicide. I have had panic attacks. I have been to counseling, and this is my journey. And I'll tell you, Adam, what was so cool was I did this series on anxiety for like 4 weeks, and then I brought my counselor to church to answer everyone's questions.
Oh my gosh.
So I had him on stage, and I had people send in questions, and he answered them on stage. Since that series, I've had at least 5 men from my church come up to me and say, hey, I have also dealt with this. I've not been able to talk about it, but I want you to know, when you shared your story, I thought, well, if he can do it, then why am I not doing it?
Yeah.
And now they're in counseling or seeing my counselor. And so now, like, we have this cool thing of, like, in our church, there's all these people that are in counseling because we're talking about anxiety. And we went from that series to a series on sex, and then now we're doing a series here soon about friendship. And so we're focusing on these things. And my sister nailed it, because when we started this year and started doing these series and talking about this, my sister really grabbed hold of our content too and really got a lot of it. And she called me one day and she said, you know what you've done? You've created a safe place to talk about these things that aren't safe to talk about anywhere else. Because nowhere on the football field, they're not talking about anxiety or mental health. It's about a game or something else. They're not talking about friendship and how to keep friends. They're not talking about sexual integrity and, how to have good sexual relationships or any of that stuff. Like, that's stuff the church has never talked about. It's stuff a pastor has never talked about. It's stuff a pastor has never shared his story about.
Yeah.
But as I'm being myself and sharing my experiences, what I've learned, how I've struggled with it, what I've been through, it's creating this safe space to where now we're having all of these. We had to start a young adult ministry because we had all these 20-somethings starting to come to our church because they're like, oh, you're a church that talks about anxiety and isn't just like just about praying it away or just having faith, but you're like, you're honest and you're open. And here's a pastor who's not just throwing scripture verses at me about this stuff, but like, this guy's had a panic attack.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's thought about this stuff, and he's gotten through it with the help of God, but also he's up there also with the help of testosterone and hours of counseling. Okay, that's what I like to hear. It's a balance of both. Okay, there's things I can do, and there's things I can give to God, and there's a mixture of this stuff. And it's just created this really cool environment, you know.
That's amazing.
And I do. I mean, if there was a pastor listening to this, I think pastors need to have the courage, and it really is. It takes courage. It really takes some balls. It takes some balls
Yeah.
to be open and honest with your congregation, not to glorify anything you've done or you've been through,
Right.
but to be open and honest with your own struggles and how God's gotten you or your marriage through it.
Yeah.
I think it's good, and it's a way for us to step off the pedestal
Mhm.
and make ourselves remind everybody that we are one of the people. Yes, we're the shepherds, but we are one of the people too,
Right.
and we deal with stuff too, and we're not perfect in any way.
Yeah. And I think
And creates a
sorry.
community.
Yeah, I think that's hard too for a lot of pastors because it's a very old school way of thinking, like you said, and the church needs to shift to this next generation and the generations to follow. And they've gone through a lot of things that this older generation that has taught all these pastors how to be a pastor, they haven't really gone through it or been able to express it because of the stigmas with it. Because with you, if you're going to be a pastor, you have to guide these people that are needing help, and if you also need help, how are they going to trust you? You know. But that's changed, like you said. Gen Z is wanting people to just be honest and real and experience or talk to someone that has the experience that they're experiencing. I found that with
Yeah.
my youth group is when I started sharing my stories from when I was a teenager, when I was a young adult, and when I was in Hollywood, not pursuing God but pursuing my own things. Um, they are getting ready to go through those things as well, and to see the difference of okay, I've been where you guys are at, and I've also been on the other side of it, and being on the other side of it's so much better because of X, Y, and Z. But I know why this is tempting. I know why this looks attractive to you right now. Um, and some people are going to listen to that and be like, you know what, I'm going to stay away from that. Or they're going to be like, you know what, I need to see for myself. But at least they have me in the back of their head being like, you know, I've been here and I've been on the other side too. So I applaud you for that. It does take a lot of courage to step up and to share your experiences like that in front of your congregation.
My hope too, you know, is, you know, I again, just the things that my dad taught me, you know, things that my dad um, emulated in front of me. You know, my kid's sitting there a lot of times when I'm talking about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Just a lot of adult
it's hard.
stuff.
It's hard to
Yeah.
say that kind of stuff in front of your kid, man. You know,
Yeah.
but I think she's better for it. You know, because she knows it's okay to talk about this stuff. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of, you know, I always tell her all the time, baby girl, this is for you. Everything we're doing is for you. This is your church now. You know,
Yeah.
I want to hand it off to the next generation. And so we're creating this safe space too, where even our kids are learning, you know, which is something as millennials we didn't learn. It
Right.
was not, that was one thing that we've not been shown well, how to deal with mental health issues and mental
Right.
health crises. So we're trying to teach this next generation how to handle it the right way, and know that the church should be a safe place to talk about this stuff. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the same-sex attraction, you know, mental health stuff, any of this stuff, the church should be the safest place in the world to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, the church has been the last place you would talk about this stuff, because you weren't supposed to talk about this stuff. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you admitted that, you either had sin in your life or you were failing in your faith. And that's just not the truth. It's just
Yeah.
not true. So we're trying to create a safe space where you can talk about all this stuff, but it starts with me. It starts with leadership. It starts with us creating a culture of it being a safe place to talk about this stuff. And so I have to lead by example.
Yeah. Preach. That's awesome, man. I love it. I love it. Well, we're almost out of time, sir. I appreciate all the time you've given us today. Like I said before, you're eating these donut holes. I picked
man.
donut holes for you because they are tiny, but they give you everything you want from a donut. And I feel like,
Is that what I am to you? Are you calling me your little donut hole? You-
that came out wrong. That came out wrong. And, you just get a bunch of them, and I feel like with you, you just get a bunch. You know, I don't know. I just fit in my head. It fit. I don't know. Take it or leave it. I'm sorry.
I feel bad for the next guy, because what if it's like a big, thick, doughy one? And you're like, you're
You
thick.
kind of fit it. Yeah.
You're thick and you're doughy and big. Anyway,
I don't know.
Tell us about how you've lost 30 pounds.
Maybe that's a flaw with this podcast. I don't know. I got to rethink it, but
I don't know. I like it.
Good. I'm glad you like it. Thank you, sir. Hey, well, Mike, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Is there anything, final words you want to say? Anything, books that you're writing, anything like that? Where can people go to watch your sermons, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's just anchoredhope.church. We're on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and all that stuff. I also stream gaming and stuff, Pastor Punk Gaming on Twitch and stuff. So
Nice.
You can check that out every once in a while. It's been a cool way to just reach people and normalize being a pastor and everything. But no, it's pretty much it. And thanks for having me,
Cool.
man. I
Of
appreciate
course.
being able to sit down with you and talk.
Yeah. And then last question, if you could describe Christianity in one sentence, what would it be?
Oh, man. Christianity in one sentence. Christianity in one sentence is, I would say, loving God, loving others, and learning to love yourself. It's something that I've added this last year in my prayers in church. For a long time, we've talked about loving God, and I think a lot of modern churches are understanding the New Testament command to love God and love others.
Mhm.
But we've really focused again on this whole initiative that we've been on this last year. You don't know how to love others until you've learned to love yourself.
That's right.
And so you can't love God without loving others. And so we've tried to connect that extra dot in there, that you need to learn to love yourself and learn that God loves you.
Yeah.
And when you learn that you can love yourself and how to take care of yourself, then you will know how to truly love others, and you will in turn love God. So I think that if there was one sentence I could put in what it looks like to follow Jesus, it's love God, love others, and love yourself.
That's great. I love it. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Good seeing you, my friend. And
You too, man.
and that's it. Thanks for coming on. Pastors and Pastries is hosted by Adam Tucker, proudly produced by Paved Path Productions. We want to give a huge special thanks to Kelsey Egan and Gracie Shed. Executive produced by Adam Tucker. Producer and sound engineer Haley Tucker. Theme song by Brandon Liu and Lou's Music. Sound mixing by Brandon Liu. Thank you for listening to Pastors and Pastries. You can check out all our episodes wherever you get your podcasts, released every Friday. Follow us on social media at Pastors and Pastries, all spelled out. And until next time, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.